Currently, we are going through this period which is known as Pitru Paksha. It is the period when we perform Shraddha, and this is one of the important sanskaras. There are 48 sanskaras, and of them, perhaps 16 are well known, and perhaps 12 are frequently performed. A sanskar is a ceremony that acts like a spiritual milestone to purify the mind and the soul. And therefore, sanskaras help to shape the mind and the soul of the individual, cleanse the soul of the individual. It's very important for us to remember our ancestors. And this is not only typical of, shall we say, our religion, but it's also true for other religions as well. The Jews honor their ancestors and Passover. There are other religions that have other means for remembering their ancestors. So it's important to understand that we have to offer remembrance and gratitude. These are the two key words, remembrance and gratitude. Because through the sanskara or through the ceremony that is being performed in remembrance and gratitude to our ancestors who have created and shaped us as we are and set the direction that our families have grown, we also purify our mind and we cleanse our soul. So today I would like to speak to you about the period of Shraddha, which we are going through, or the period of Pitru Paksha. And the story behind the Pitru Paksha is that according to the Puranas, when a person passes away, in the transition towards going to Swarg, he has to go through a period where he stays in a place which is known as Pitru. So generally 3 generations occupy Pitru, and that is 3 generations of deceased ancestors follow Pitru. And when the next person passes away and he moves into Pitru, the one ahead in the queue, he moves on to Swarg. Now, when the person is in Pitru, he is subject to what maybe Christians call as purgatory. He is not subject to the enjoyments of Swarg or the sufferings of Narak, but he is dependent for that period on the good deeds he has done in the past and the piety of his descendants. There is a story in the Mahabharata, and that story in the Mahabharata describes how Karna, who after he passed away, found himself in a very difficult position because whatever Karna touched turned to gold, much like Midas with the golden touch. So Karna could not eat anything, could not drink anything because whatever he touched turned to gold. So Karna went to Indra. In some Puranas it is described that he went to Yamaraj. And having gone to Indra or Yama, he asked Indra that why is it that I cannot drink and why is it that I cannot eat? And why does everything that I touch turn to gold? So Indra told Karna that in your life you have been very pious and you have given gold very freely. And because of all the donations of gold that you have given very freely, whatever you touch turns to gold. He says, but I can't eat, I can't drink. And Indra said, yes, that's because you never fed anyone. You never performed Shraddh for your ancestors. So Karna says, I never knew who were my ancestors. He says, even if you don't know who your ancestors were, you should have performed the Shraddh ceremony. And then he gives him an opportunity, and Karna is reborn for 15 days in this Pitru Paksha period, wherein he performs the Shraddh ceremonies, offering food and water to his ancestors, and thus, when he passes away at the end of these 15 days, he is able to nourish himself prior to entering into Swarga. Another aspect is that they say that if you do not have water or food available to you when you are in Pitrulok, then you are rejected from Pitrulok and you go to a hell which is known as Pu. Thus, there is what we call as Putra. Putra is a person who performs Shraddh. And because he performs Shraddh, he frees Putra. He frees from Pu, his ancestors. So his ancestors do not suffer in the interim period when they pass away. Therefore, in fact, it's commonly said that the son who performs Shraddh is called a Putra, whereas the son who does not perform his obligatory Shraddh is considered to be something that also comes from the same passage, and he is known as Mutra. So the ceremony of Shraddh is a ceremony which gives honor, which gives remembrance, and which gives gratitude to the ancestors. And while it is intended essentially for 3 generations who have passed away before you, it's also important to use it as an occasion to remember all those who have passed before you, all those who have preceded you. Because just that remembrance and that attitude of gratitude cleanses your mind and cleanses your soul. But we are talking about the Bhagavad-Gita. And in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says that while we talk in normal parlance about birth and death and so on and so forth, you should understand that the soul is neither born nor dies. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya. Ajo nitya shashvato yam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharite. For the soul there is neither birth nor death, nor having once been does it ever cease to be. Unborn, undying, primeval, it is not slain when the body is slain. So let us understand clearly what is really happening at the time that one leaves the body. Krishna explains, Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara, tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatra na muyati. From infancy to childhood to youth to maturity to middle age to old age. Finally, at the time of death, the soul keeps changing bodies all along. And when at the time of death, he moves on to another body. So Krishna also explains in the Bhagavad Gita that Vasansha Jirnanya Yatha Vihaya Navani Grinati Naro Parani Tatha Sharirani Vihaya Jirnanya Anyani Saunyati Navani De. Krishna explains that just as you cast off your worn out clothes and you wear fresh ones, so also at the time of death, we cast off our physical body and we put on a new physical body. So birth and death is movement from one gross body to another gross body. By gross body, I mean a body of flesh and blood. And what happens to the gross body that we leave behind? The gross body experiences what is known as the relatives sit down for the Antyeshti or the final sanskara, and then the body is cremated. While this did not appear available at the time, currently we understand that if it is possible, one can donate the organs of the body. And to donate the organs of a body is a very noble thing. Well, after all, you do donate your old clothes, don't you? If you donate your old clothes, which are still fit enough to be worn by others, it's a pious deed. How much more pious would be the deed if when you are leaving the body or when you are about to leave the body, you grant and donate your heart and your lungs. You can donate your liver and kidneys and pancreas. You can donate so many organs from your eyes. You can donate your skin. In fact, there are maybe 17 or 18 parts of your body that you can donate before you leave this body. In fact, this piety is known, especially among the Buddhists, to bring tremendous good karma. And because of this strong Buddhist belief in good karma, in Sri Lanka, it is very easy for people to get corneal transplants. I met one friend who was suffering from corneal problem and he was going blind. And he realized that he would have to have his cornea replaced. Otherwise, he would be unable to see. So he chose to go to Sri Lanka. And going to Sri Lanka, he easily got the organ donation of the cornea. And thus, that cornea was replaced in his eyes and he regained full sight. So, this body is, after all, of flesh and blood. And the time comes when, just like old clothes are cast away, and indeed you might donate these old clothes, you could leave this body by donating your organ at the time of death. So you may ask, what about the Antyeshti? What about this? What about that? It's simple. The body remains, it's just the internal organs that are removed. And the Antyeshti body is returned to the relatives for the Antyeshti. So there is absolutely no religious reason against donating your body. And also for those who are interested not in becoming free from the cycle of birth and death, but who are anticipating another birth, such people can also look forward to getting tremendous good karma as the result of their donation. But the truth is, the soul does not die. It moves, in fact, from one body to the next. And as it moves from one body to the next, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad-Gita, Shariram yad avapnoti yad chapya utkramatishvara grihitvaitani samyati vayur gandhaniva ashayet. This is the 8th verse of the 15th chapter, where Krishna says, as the air carries the fragrance of a flower from one place to another, so also does the embodied soul carry the impressions of the previous life in terms of the mind and senses when it leaves an old body and goes on to the next one. So we have a gross body and we have a subtle body. The gross body is a body of flesh and blood. We leave that behind. But there is a subtle body. And that subtle body is known as the mind, intelligence, and ego. And this subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego, along with its bundle of unfulfilled desires or vasanas, along with its bundle of karmas, is carried by the soul from one body to the next. And Krishna explains in the 15th chapter, 9th verse, Shrotram chakshu sparshanam cha rasanam granam eva cha adhishtaya manaschayam vishayan upasevate. And this subtle body, as it enters the womb, it gathers around it ears, eyes, skin, tongue, nose, which are gathered around this subtle body that the soul carries. And thus it enjoys the objects of the senses. So Krishna explains, Avinashi tu tad vidhi yena sarvam idam tatam. That which lies inside your body, that's you, are indestructible. And thus in 15.10 he says, Utkramantam sthitam vapi bhunjanam va gunanvitan vimudo nanu pashyanti jnana chakshusha. So when we see a person dying, or when we see that a person is now passed away, how do you look at it? It depends whether you are ignorant or whether your guru has opened your eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. So in 15.10, Krishna says, the ignorant do not see the soul as it lies in the body and as it moves on to the next body. But those whose eyes are jnana chakshu, those whose eyes are eyes of knowledge, such a person, he can see. So therefore he says, Yatanto yoginaschaivam pashyanti atmanyavastitam yatanto apya akritatmano nainam pashyanti achetasa. Striving yogis are able to realize that the soul lies inside the body. However, those whose minds are not purified, they cannot understand this, no matter how much they struggle and they try to understand this. But in fact, even though the soul carries the subtle body from one physical body to the next physical body, what really happens is that there is no point of contact between the subtle body and the gross body and the soul. The soul does not get in contact with the gross or subtle body. In chapter 13, verse 33, Krishna explains, Yatha sarvagatam sokshmad akasham no palipyate sarvatra avastito dehe tatha atman no palipyate. So Krishna explains, just like the sky holds everything within it, but although the sky holding everything within it is not contaminated by what it holds, similarly, consciousness pervades the body. And this, the soul, is not affected by the attributes of the body. It is not affected by the attributes of the subtle body or the gross body. It is not affected by the mind, intelligence, ego, nor is it affected by the physical body. Earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has explained, Bhumi apo nalo vayur kam mano buddhirevacha ahankara itya me bhinna prakriti ashtada. Clearly explains in the Bhagavad Gita. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, these are part of my inferior energies. Aparyam itastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabhao yayedam daryate jagat. This is what you are part of my superior energy, which is sustaining and maintaining creation. In fact, these two inferior and superior energies are Prakriti and the soul. And Prakriti does everything, the soul does nothing. It is only the observer, it is only the witness. It is only the Sakshi. But for one who is in ignorance, he foolishly imagines he is the doer of all activities. Prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. Prakriti is doing everything. Your mind, intelligence, ego, the physical body is doing everything. But the soul, you falsely imagine, the consciousness falsely imagines that I am the doer. Karya karanam kartritve hetur prakriti uchyate purusha sukha dukhanam bhoktritva hetur uchyate. Indeed, because the soul thinks it is the doer, it enjoys and it suffers whatever your Prakriti performs. So for one who is a pious person, when he leaves this body, even if he is unsuccessful in his endeavors to become free from the cycle of birth and death, he gets a second chance. In the Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter, Krishna says to Arjuna, Nahi kalyana krit kaschid durgatim tata gacchati. That one who is on this path of spiritual evolution is never overcome by evil. Prapya punya kritam lokan ushitva shashvati samaha suchinam shrimatam gehe yoga brashti vijayate. So that person who has been striving for salvation, who has been striving for yoga, who has been striving for moksha, he does not lose anything. He is reborn into a family that is both pious and prosperous. So his time is not necessarily spent in struggling for maintaining his physical body because he's born in a prosperous family. And also, because he is born in a pious family, all samskaras are given to him and he acquires spiritual education. He takes up exactly where he left off in the previous life. And for the person who is even more advanced, very rarely such a person comes back. But if he does, he comes back in a family of yogis who are very advanced, and he progresses immediately from wherever he has taken birth. But what happens to the person who has lived a sinful life? What about the person who has caused harm and suffering to people around him, to creatures around him? Who has been a burden to the world when he was alive? To a person who has behaved like an asura. What happens to such a person? That person, Krishna says, is born into an asuric womb. Asurim yonim apanam mudho janmani janmani. So that foolish person is born into a womb and he goes into a downward spiral. And in that downward spiral, he takes birth after birth, becoming increasingly deluded, increasingly ignorant, and increasingly suffering within this world. But for one who leaves this body, having passed through Pitralok, he goes to Swarg or Narak, or Swarg and Narak, before he comes back again into this world. Who goes to Swarg first? The sinful people go to Swarg first. There's an example given in the Mahabharata where Yudhishthir asks Yamaraj to show him where his brothers are at the time of when he is moving upwards and he finally meets Yamaraj. So Yamaraj shows him that his brothers are in hell and they're suffering. And then he says, where are the Kauravas? And he shows him the Kauravas. And the Kauravas are in heaven and they're enjoying. So he says, how unfair is life? How unfair after death? That my brothers, the pious ones, they're suffering in hell, and the Kauravas, the sinners, they're in heaven. So again, Yamaraj shows him that the brothers have now moved on to heaven and the Kauravas have moved to hell. So whatever you have most of, you experience last. So those who have pious deeds, they experience hell first and they experience heaven later. Whereas those who experience heaven first, because they've performed so many sinful deeds, ultimately rot in hell. And from heaven and hell, what happens? Krishna explains very clearly. Te tam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam shine punya martilokam vishanti. That having exhausted their pious deeds, such people again return to this cycle of birth and death. So they have pious credit, also known as Ishtapurta. And this pious credit that they have created out of their pious deeds takes them to heaven. But when their pious credits are exhausted, they must come back again into this world. It's like if you go to a holiday resort, you're allowed to stay there as long as you have credit. When the credit is exhausted, you must come back again, back home, where you belong. But Krishna says, for those who worship me, they come to me. This is very important. Krishna says, Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartino arjuna mam upetya tu kaunteya punarjanmana dukyate. He says from Brahmalok downwards, everybody must come back. But those who come to me never to return. Yanti deva vrata devan, pitran yanti pitrvrata, bhutani yanti bhuteja, yanti madhyajno apam. One who worships the gods, the devatas, he goes to the abode of the devatas and comes back. Those who worship the Pitris, they go to the abode of the Pitris and eventually they come back. Those who worship the Bhutas, they go to the abode of the Bhutas and then they come back eventually. But those who worship Krishna, they go to Krishna never to return. Ananyas chinta yanto mam ye jana pariupasate tesham nitya viyuktanam yoga kshemam vahamiyam. For those who undeviatingly, constantly remember and worship me, to them I preserve all the spiritual gain they have, and I preserve it, and I also provide what they lack. So with this, I will pause here. If anyone has any questions, you are free to answer. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. And I'll start with our first question. So does Shraddh have to be performed only by the son, or is it also the duty of the daughter? In other words, is it up to each individual or only the male members?
See, traditionally, most of these ceremonies and all were performed, and law and order was not there. Rape, kidnapping, all these things were there. So it was very important that it was the male members who went out and contacted people for arranging the Shraddh ceremony and so on and so forth. And therefore, they also, to protect the women, said that the daughter's son can perform the Shraddh for her ancestral line. But personally, if you ask me, in today's day and age, with such law and order that exists, as people are safe, everyone has an equal opportunity, and God is very democratic. In the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says, Mam hi partha vyapashritya tepi syu papayonaya striyo vaishyas tatha shudras tepi yanti paramgati. So in this verse, Krishna promises equality, spiritual equality to all women. So there is no question. The women can also perform. If you find a priest who is a little traditional, orthodox, or narrow-minded, please find another priest.
Sure, sir. Very nice of you. So, sir, moving to another question. So, other religions and civilizations have also had performing rituals for afterlife or for ancestors, such as the Egyptian civilization, if we talk about. They used to perform rituals for the ones who were dead for their afterlife. So, is there any difference what Egyptians believed and the Pitru Paksh?
Really, I'm not an expert on Egyptian or other religions, so I will abstain from getting involved with such discussion.
Okay, sure, sir. With that, moving to another question. So, sir, do we perform these rituals to get the blessings for our ancestors, or do we perform these rituals to help our ancestors afterlife, or both?
Actually, it helps our ancestors and it helps us. Those who perform Shraddh, that has been described in the Puranas, are assured of health, wealth, and happiness. And they also provide the necessary requirements for their ancestors. So their ancestors are also wherever they are benefiting. If you believe that your ancestor has already been reborn, even if he is reborn, whatever you are offering eventually goes to them. So you don't have to worry that whatever you're offering is in vain and that it benefits both parties, you as well as your ancestors.
Okay, sir. So, today's last question, it is following the last question only. Like, how do the blessings of our ancestors help us in living a safe and secure life?
I already said that, right? According to the Puranas, you get wealth, happiness, and you get good health as a consequence of remembering your ancestors. Through remembrance, through gratitude, we purify ourselves. Sanskara purifies the mind and it purifies the soul as well. So this is a benefit all around.
Absolutely, sir. So, sir, these were our questions for today's session, and thank you so much for such a wonderful session.
Hari Om, Krishna, Hare.
Hare Krishna, sir. Thank you so much.